and give voice to their concerns that recommendations have a long way to go in terms of being fulfilled. So I guess I want to ask the minister again, and I won't repeat this over and over again, but I would like to know how many recommendations have actually been completed and fulfilled, and how many are in progress, and how many require planning and action. And if the minister doesn't have that information at his fingertips, would he be prepared to make it available in a reasonable period of time so that we can, I can share that information with people in my constituency and elsewhere as well who are very concerned about these issues. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Order, please. Order, please. The time has come for the committee to recess as we approach the moment of interruption. The member for Colchester Musquodoboit Valley perhaps could take the chair as Deputy Speaker.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The Honourable the member for Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise today to debate the strike that's currently ongoing at the Regional Residential Services Society. And Mr. Speaker, what I'd like to start by saying is that Stephen wants to go home, which is odd considering that Stephen's living with his parents. But he's living with his parents for the first time in 10 years because Stephen is 36 years old, he's mentally challenged, he has a seizure disorder, and he's a resident of one of the Society's homes here in Halifax. It's one of the homes that has had to close because of the strike. One of the residents has gone back to his family in Newfoundland. Another one has gone back to his family in Chesapeake. And Stephen has gone back to his family in my constituency. I haven't spoken to Stephen, but today, earlier this afternoon, I spoke to his mother. His mother wants me to know what's happening to Stephen. And when I asked her the impact on the family of having their son back for the first time in 10 years, she wouldn't talk about the burden on her or her husband. She talked about Stephen. Stephen is finding the situation upsetting, more and more upsetting every day. He's more and more restless every day. He wants to know, when can he go home? Because even though today he's living with his mother and father, home is the group home in which he lives in Halifax. That's where his friends are, his mother told me. And his friends are what he calls both the other residents of the home and the workers in the home that are on strike. And I asked Stephen's mother today if you could stand up in the legislature and talk to the minister. What would you say? And what she said to me is that she would stand up here and say to the minister, get busy. Get to work. Get negotiating. Nothing is going to be resolved if nobody's talking. So that is the message of Stephen's mother for the Minister of Community Services. Get to work. The minister stands up here in this House and says, well, I can't do anything, but he can. The matter is squarely on that minister's shoulders. This matter is squarely in that minister's hands. Because the Regional Residential Services Society is funded 100% by that minister's department. That society can't do anything unless that minister says it's okay. That society can't offer the workers any more money unless that minister gives it to them. It is no answer to stand up in this house or outside this house and say it's not his responsibility. This is 100% that minister's responsibility. This is not fundamentally, at its core, a dispute between the society and the workers' union. And as if to underline that point, the society issued a news release today. And I'm sorry to say that the gist of the news release is that they are withdrawing. The society is withdrawing from the meeting brokered by the families for tomorrow night. They are not going to attend that meeting. But what they say in this news release is that the reason they're not attending is that they believe it would be dishonest to participate because they have nothing new to bring to the table. Quote, "We are 100% funded by the Department of Community Services, and there is a cap on the salary amount they provide us with. There has been no change in the funding they have made available to us." End of quote. Mr. Speaker, I read that news release as a cry for help from the society. The society is saying that they can't do anything unless that minister says it's okay. They have nothing new to bring to the table until that minister gives it to them. Yesterday, I was privileged to walk the picket line with some of the workers, only for a couple of hours. 1 hour. There are 2 homes in my constituency being picketed, and I spent an hour at one and an hour at the other. And I had a lot of time to talk to the workers about what's going on. And one of the many things they pointed out to me was how well funded these homes are during the strike. These workers are on strike because they're earning $13 an hour, and it's not enough for their training. It's not enough for them to live on in the city of Halifax. It's not the same as what workers with the same job description are getting at the Nova Scotia Hospital. It is not adequate for people with the responsibilities that they have. And yet, while they're on strike, replacement workers or the replacement workers agency is being paid anywhere from $30 to $50 an hour to replace them. It seems that the department has money when it wants to, but they can't pay the workers a living wage. These people, these workers, are charged with the physical and mental and social well-being of some of the most vulnerable among us. And yet, they're expected to get by on $13 an hour, and all they're asking for is fairness. There's another group of workers doing the same work, or substantially the same work, at the Nova Scotia Hospital, and they're being paid over $18 an hour. There is no justification for that difference other than the fact that one group is paid by the Department of Health and the other group is paid by the Department of Community Services. There is no justification for the difference. But what happens when you pay people $13 an hour to do that kind of work is that there's a very high turnover, which is something else that I learned yesterday. There's a very high turnover among workers of the society because they can't make a living. For those with children, with families to support, they can't make a living on $13 an hour. And so, some very reluctantly, they move on to other work. They go back to school so that they can earn a living wage. It is not too much to expect that these workers should get parity, that they should be treated fairly. It is not too much to expect that we should pay workers enough money that they can stay at a job that many of them love and would love to continue at. And it tears them up to know that they're not there with their residents. They're showing, during the strike, they're showing a great deal of respect to the residents. For example, one of the decisions they made is that none of them would picket a home at which they worked, because if the residents saw them, it might be upsetting. So they only picketed at homes where they did not work. At one of the picket lines I went to, they deliberately had their picket line on the side part of the property, because in one of those homes, one of the residents liked to sit in front of the window and look out, And they didn't do that because he might find it upsetting. Those workers during this strike are showing a great deal of respect for the people for whom they care. They're showing a great deal of restraint. They're being very reasonable in their demands, and what they get in return is a minister who says, it's not his problem. It is his problem. It is your problem, minister. It's in your hands. It's in your shoulders. The society cannot make a better wage offer until you say so. And until you say so, minister, Stephen can't go home. And I want, when the minister stands up here today, I want that minister to speak to the workers, to speak to the families about why this has to go on, and most important of all, I want that minister to speak to Stephen and tell Stephen when can he go home. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order, please. The member for Cape Breton Nova.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to speak in support of this motion. It states, be it resolved that the government and the Department of Labour, of which the department is part of the government, has shown a lack of concern for workers, residents, and their families by allowing the present labour dispute at group homes to drag on. Now, it just ends at that point with a period, but the situation has now been dragging on for 14 days, 2 weeks. And there doesn't appear to be any end in sight because of the government's lack of concern and action on this matter. I have here an item from the Halifax Herald, the electronic format. I'll table it. The heading on it is "No End in Sight for Group Home Strike" by Susan Bradley, staff reporter. Strike is now in its 14th day. Affects 178 adults with mental handicaps and 40 group homes in the Halifax regional municipality. So the strike is not province-wide. It's confined to the Halifax area. But that doesn't make it any less a matter of concern for me than if it were in Sydney. It's a strike that affects people. And if it affects people and hurts people, then it's a matter of concern that we should all want to see resolved. It should never have taken place in the first place. I said I'd table this item, so if there's a tabler here, let it be tabled. Now, I've been through this kind of thing before. Let me talk in a broad perspective. I've been through this kind of thing with the Russell McClellan Liberal government. Oh, yes. I can even tell you, Mr. Speaker, sometime when I have more time, about a strike that I was personally a witness to in Manitoba under the NDP government of Ed Schreier. So let none of us say that it can't happen when our party is in power, because it does. But the thing is that you got to solve it. That's your job if you're the government. You can't just let it drag on and on and on. That's irresponsible. And besides, there's an election coming, and you'd think for that reason they would want to see it solved quickly. You know, I mean, when we were in power, it was sort of your ultimate nightmare that something like this would happen on the eve of an election. When we were last in power, we were under the constant threat of an election every day. Every time the honorable finance critic, as he was then for the NDP, opened his mouth, we thought, oh dear, the house is going to fall. And ultimately it did. So we were under the constant threat of an election. And yet, these things still happened. And, you know, I've been through it. I know the classic arguments of from a government point of view, saying, well, it's not really us that's doing it. It's those bad guys over there. Blame them. Don't blame us, you know. And yet the bad guys over there are just a front for the government. I don't want to compare them to the satellite governments of the people's democracies in Eastern Europe from 1945 or whenever they began until 1990. But in a very real sense, you could make that analogy. They're organizations that have no money except what the government gives them and are not likely to do anything unless they have government backing. I'll tell you what you could safely call it. Never mind the people's democracies. Let's talk about sponsorship. If you and I sponsor a hockey team and pay for the uniforms and the ice time and the sticks and all the things that you need to have a hockey team, are we not ultimately responsible for what that hockey team does if they go out and do something very bad, like bust up the rink because they lost the game in overtime? You know, the sponsors are responsible. That's what sponsorship involves. Now, the government here is the sponsor of the organizations against which these workers are on strike. And yet the government is just turning its back to the whole matter and saying, oh, well, it will go away, it doesn't matter, you know, it will solve itself. Laissez manger du gâteau, as Marie Antoinette said. Yeah. So, now the government has had all kinds of proposals made to it. I have here another item I can table. It's a letter from the president of the Nova Scotia Government and General Employees Union to, guess who? The Minister of Community Services. Saying, dear Mr. Minister, it's up to you. That's the heading. Read, it's up to you. And outlines all kinds of ways that it could be solved if there was a will to do so. You know, where there's a will, there's a way. I'm reading from the letter. We have proposed a joint review process, a joint conciliation board, a phase-in approach to a new wage settlement, and most recently, binding arbitration. All of these proposals have been rejected by the employer and apparently by you and your department as sponsors of our employer. So, they've walked away from it. They've said, oh, well, it's not our concern. Doesn't matter. Let it happen. Let it carry on all summer. We don't care. Is that a consistent message to be getting from a government that's supposed to be seeking re-election and wanting the people to vote for it and say, yes, we like this government, give us more, we like $155 checks in June, and if they could be accelerated to come out every month of the year, well, all the better. We'll vote for it. You know? I mean, the government's doing that much on one front, and all these Tory nominating conventions I have in this report I just got today from McEwen Sleuth Services, and I hear that there's one more nominating convention planned above and beyond the number that are listed here. And how many are there here? I think it's 25. 25 meetings scheduled for the next several weeks to nominate Tory candidates. Here, table this list. Yeah, I hear there's one more scheduled above and beyond those 25 in Truro Bible Hill for the Honourable Jamie Muir, making it 26. So that's half the seats in the House that are going to nominate candidates for in the next several weeks. They are getting ready, no question. You know, whether you're running on that side or on this side, it's time to get your sign screened and your stakes sharpened and order plenty of nails and washers. You know, it's that time of the year. Big heads on the nails, yes, so that the NDP doesn't tear them down. But I won't get into that. I won't get into that, Mr. Speaker. You and Glace may have plenty of experience with my washer method in keeping Liberal signs up. Now, let's get back to the subject under discussion. The subject under discussion is all these activities on the one hand to soften the people up, to vote Tory once again and put that ham government back into power, versus their total lack of concern at all on this matter. They just let the people mill around outside and don't pay any attention. I don't hear that they've called the police or anything. They certainly haven't brought in that bill that they had for the other group. What was that other group? Bill 68, exactly what I have here on this piece of paper. We had to sit in this House morning, noon, and night, 24 hours a day to pass Bill 68 for them, to keep them happy. And then when it was all passed, they said, oh, well, we don't need it. We didn't really require it. It was just something we wanted to do along the way.
They're intimidating the nurses.
Yeah. I mean, that's the record of this group in office. They've taken on the nurses, they've taken on the ambulance attendants, now they're taking on the group that's currently on strike, and I suppose they will keep that pattern up because that's part of their tough boy or tough girl image. You see, they think they can be mean to those that are public enemies. I don't want to get into that kind of discussion either, Mr. Chair. They're not public enemies. They're people who are trying to help the community. And if instead of viewing them as adversaries, they were to be viewed as part of the team, the whole team, not just the Tory party, but everybody who's working together to try to make this province a better place to live. That's the way you have to look at it. And you have to find the money to do it. Now, they can find $155 in the month of June, The checks are scheduled to go at the end of June, but I hear that there are plans underway now to accelerate the release of checks and get them out earlier in June so that they will come out before Election Day and not after.
$68 million.
You see, that's $68 million. Well, I have only a minute left to speak. I'm only getting started, Mr. Speaker. But if they have $68 million for that, well, why couldn't they find maybe a tenth of that amount, $6.8 million, for this particular matter? You know, it's a matter of priority, Mr. Speaker. What you want is what you get. And if you want satisfaction, if you want solution, you will find it. And if you don't want that, no matter how hard you go through the motions, you'll never get there. Because where the will is lacking, so is the way. Thank you.
Order, please. Order, please. I would remind our visitors in the gallery that there is to be no applauding, please, during the debate. The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'm very pleased to have a chance to enter this debate here this evening. I would like to start by saying that the motion that actually was brought forward was more in line with what the Honourable Member from Cape Breton Nova was discussing rather than the member who spoke on behalf of the NDP from Halifax Fairview. It makes reference to the fact that the government and the Department of Labour, as it pertains to this, this dispute. So I would like to start by saying I asked to speak to it because I felt that the resolution was targeting the Department of Labour, and I think that all people in this room, and I suspect all people in this chamber, have an appreciation of the role of the Department of Environment and Labour in this. They provide the conciliation services. There's a framework that's in place. It's the collective bargaining process, and we have an employer, which is one of many wonderful service providers, nonprofit groups run by volunteer boards, with wonderful employees too, Mr. Chairman. In addition to that, we have the residents, who are more vulnerable members of society, and in this case, the RRSS board is charged with caring for their welfare and watching out for that of their families. One of the things that I think that everybody would agree is, as much as possible, as the member from Halifax Fairview pointed out, is to try to keep the residents and the families out of this as much as possible. I'm not sure that what took place this evening is necessarily advancing that cause, but with regards to the member from Cape Breton Nova, we are trying to respect the collective bargaining process here, and I think the member would respect that. And he makes references to times past where Nova Scotians has looked to government to respect the collective bargaining process, as we are doing here. Mr. Chairman, in '99, the sector got together, the caregivers, with the municipal upload of community services to the Department of Community Services, to set standards right across the province that provided ultimately geographic wage equity. They set with those standards a level of training, and with the level of training, which requires some community college courses, a wage package that was considered to be fair based on the expectations of the people that carry out this wonderful work in caring for the residents. And the wage package, Mr. Chair, was set at $13.70 an hour. And for some of the caregivers, this represented a significant wage increase, but for others it represented a very substantial one. Because, Mr. Chair, some of them were being paid as little as $6 an hour. This brought wage equity across the province, and it also, perhaps more importantly, brought a care equity across the province so that the residents that are in the care of the minister in those homes could be guaranteed the same level of service regardless of whether they lived in Yarmouth or Sydney or anywhere in between. And I think that was a very important achievement, and it's one that was worked on by people that were in this position long before I became minister. And I pay tribute to them for the work that was done regardless of which government they came from. And with that equity and the standards, this government, came up with an additional $28 million that phased that in over that 4-year period. And Mr. Chairman, that works out to the funding based on an FTE of $28,500, which is significant, Mr. Speaker. There are people that make more than $28,500, but there are people that make less. So there was a recognition on the part of government that it is a significant responsibility, and the salaries, the funding that are provided to the service providers, like RRSS, was adjusted accordingly. So a 50% increase approximately over 4 years. That is significant, Mr. Speaker. When we entered this new round of negotiations with the sector, because the department does not fund directly, it funds through the nonprofit service providers, the volunteer boards of directors often that are made up of people that perhaps have a family member that's in the care of some of these homes. There was a feeling that in addition to the increment that was being prescribed of 2, 2, and 2, that there needed to be something more. And indeed, Mr. Speaker, a pension plan was added to it at a substantial cost, and that the funding was made available to pay for a greater care of the employees' group insurance plan. And while negotiations did go on for a time, Mr. Speaker, I would take note that 3 unions found this to be acceptable. Others were close to concluding an agreement at the time that the strike broke. So, Mr. Speaker, I would say that it's clear that there are some out there that find that the package that is provided by community services to fund the sector was acceptable to them. I would also like to point out that the concern of RRS and their volunteer board of directors and Bev Wicks, who's a very respected person in the delivery of these services, has been very much the concern for the care of the residents. They have bent over backwards to try to contact the families. There have been care coordinators that have been going out and meeting with them, the residents and their families that are in the group homes, that are in Simpson Hall, which is a temporary establishment and a former nurse's residence. Because, Mr. Speaker, the residents are more vulnerable members of our society. It is definitely true that they find this difficult to comprehend. And as such, the RRSS, Residential Rehabilitation Service Society, is out there trying to work with them to make sure that the best possible care under the circumstances is provided for them. In addition to that, they tried to negotiate with the union to get some sort of reasonable notice of strike. And the point being is that there would not be a need for a contingency plan if they knew that there was going to be a reasonable notice. The union did not agree to that provision, and so that's where we got into having to make alternative arrangements, because the focus, Mr. Speaker, is clearly always got to be the care of the residents. I would tell you also, Mr. Speaker, is that before the strike began, I personally went to Simpson Hall. I wanted to have comfort that all that could possibly be done to care for the residents had been done. I met with the person that is in charge there. I met with a number of the service providers, and I met with a number of the residents. And, Mr. Speaker, I would tell you that I was greatly comforted with what I saw, although not happy with the possibility of the impending strike. I am satisfied that RRSS has done all that it could to address the concerns of the residents and the families. I also regret that the point about the picketing of the group homes is something that is difficult for the residents, and that originally there was an acknowledgement by the union that they would prefer not to do this. And unfortunately, I see that they have chosen to picket the residents, the group homes. That is more difficult for the residents. And I guess that my request is to try to please leave the residents and the families as much as possible out of this labor dispute. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order, please. Time for debate has expired.
Thank you. I'll call the committee to order and recognize the member from Halifax, Needham.
I guess I'll start by asking the minister if he had a chance over the break to think about my last question, which was also my first question, and whether or not he needs me to go through it again or not. I'd be happy to do that. But I am quite anxious to get that information.
The Minister of Education.
I want to thank the honourable member for the question, and I can tell the honourable member that we will endeavour to provide a detailed response to her with respect to the areas. But the Black Report Implementation Review Committee assess the current status of the implementation and what needs to be done next and the full cost of that implementation. And a report was presented to the department with expectations that it would be considered during budget allocations. And the review identified 4 key areas of priority funding. The first was the Africa Centre Learning Institute. The second, the student support workers. And 3, dedicated funding for race relations, cross-cultural understanding, and human rights and initiatives. And 4, ACSD program enhancement, a curriculum consultant, and 4 plus/school readiness. And after the review, CASE and the African Nova Scotia community expected government to allocate more resources to the implementation process. I previously indicated some of the budget items that exist for that, but as I said at the outset, I will be quite pleased to provide the honourable member with a detailed breakdown of additional matters.
Thank you. Minister, recognize the member from Halifax, Needham.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank the minister. I look forward to getting that information very much. Just before we recessed for the moment of interruption and the late debate, the minister indicated that monies have been allocated in this budget for 10 student support workers, my $300,000. And I'm wondering if the minister could break that out across the boards. How will that be allocated across the various boards?
Thank you for the question, and direct that to the Minister of Education.
The criteria that was used, Mr. Chairman, was to take the percentage of African Nova Scotian students in each board and use that as the basis of of the distribution of the funds. And we do have a complete list which I can make available to the honourable member.
Thank you, Minister. I recognize the member from Halifax, Needham.
Thank you very much, and I want to thank the minister, and I would very much like to have a chance to look at that list as well. I want to just tell the minister before I move on that when I was first elected, there were at least 15 student support workers working in the Halifax Regional Board, and that number is down to about 5 or 6. And I know at least 2 of the people who are currently doing this work, and they are phenomenal. They are people who you would want to be working with young people who are at risk. The schools, I know the principals rely heavily on them to be involved with young people who teachers and principals have identified as being kids who are struggling in the school system and who require some additional support and intervention. And these workers do an amazing job. But since the reduction in student support workers, since it's gone from like 15 or 16 down to 5, these workers have been put at a real disadvantage. And one of the workers I remember so well talking about his work and how it changed with the reduction in the number of people doing this work. And he says all they do now is put out fires. They have no capacity really to do anything but deal with the most serious kinds of crises. So the loss of student support workers has had a tremendously negative impact on our schools. And while I recognize the government's allocation of some additional resources to address the need for student support workers, I want to make sure that the minister is aware that it doesn't go anywhere close to meeting the need or meeting what was there 4 years ago. I want to ask about the race relations and cross-cultural understanding and human rights coordinators in each school board. The minister has indicated that there is some additional monies allocated in this budget to set up RCH coordinators in each board. And I want to ask how many boards were there where this position didn't exist? Is this a new position that's being created in some boards? I mean, I know that in the Halifax Regional School Board, there has been an RCH position, and I know that there's a similar position in the Annapolis Valley Board. Can you tell me if new positions are being created here, or if this is an augmentation of existing RCH staff in the various boards?
Thank you for the question. Direct that to the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank the honourable member for the question. I previously undertook to provide her with the allocation of the funding, and this is both the $150,000 allocation. Let's see now. For RCH, and the 300,000 figure, taking the two of them together, the Annapolis board would receive $65,000, Cape Breton Victoria $50,000, Chignecto Central $50,000, the Conseil Scolaire $10,000, Halifax $145,000, Southwest $80,000, and the Strait $50,000. That's for a total of $450,000. And I believe, with respect to her most recent question, that all boards now have in place. The Strait board was the one board without such a person, and now all of those boards, I'm informed, have someone in place.
Thank Thank you, Minister. I recognize the member from Halifax Needham.
Thank you very much. I want to ask the minister, in terms of the policy, the racial equity policy of the department, and the relationship that the department has with each board, what kind of accountability do the boards have for the way they operationalize the racial equity policy? And specifically, I'll give the minister an example, and then maybe he can help me understand how the Department of Education responds to this situation. The Race Relations, Cross-Cultural Understanding and Human Rights Division of the Halifax Regional School Board has recently been downgraded to a program inside the board, where in the past the coordinator for RCH sat at the most senior management level in the board, and not only had responsibility for program development, but also would play a role in terms of human resource questions. So staffing would have a role to play in terms of a whole variety of issues outside of just providing a program. And I know that there's a really, there's a very strong feeling in the African Nova Scotian community, particularly among Black educators and Black learners, that the Halifax Regional School Board, in their reorganization, has put race relations and cross-cultural understanding and human rights at a much lower priority, and they've really, it's a step backwards for all of the work that so many people have been doing to try to give that, that issue and the important work of the people doing the work in the RCH units some real teeth. So my question is whether or not the Department of Education, and as part of their racial equity policy, requires that school boards treat the RCH units as more than a program or a small unit within the board, but actually is encouraging boards to filter so much of what it is they do through a lens that tries to identify what is the impact on everything they do on African Nova Scotian learners, that keep that at the forefront.
Thank you for the question. Recognize the Minister of Education.
I want to thank the honourable member for the question and for her comments. I would remind the honourable member and members of the committee that one of the major responsibilities of the African Nova Scotian board member on our school boards is to ensure that what she is articulating does in fact occur, and that is a constant reminder to the school boards, and we believe one that in time will prove to be very effective, and that, you know, we're very personally, I'm very pleased with that initiative that has been put in place, and based on my own experience in working in high schools of this province, especially in Guysborough High School, and the need for that that level of involvement is considerable, and I believe that in time it will prove to be very significant. With respect to Halifax, I understand that the level of consultation was perhaps not as would have been desired, but there is a commitment to ensure that there is further consultation in the future with respect to their decision making. I can point out to the honourable member that the plan calls for 2 positions now reporting to two separate directors, the Director of Programs and the Director of Human Resources. and the school board has promised to consult with the African Canadian groups before a final decision is made about the positions. So the department, as I indicated previously, for this fiscal year is allocating $150,000 as the first installment toward targeted funding for RCH at the school boards. And this will assist them in securing staff and PD. Yes, the level of communication could have been greater. There's an acknowledgement of that and a commitment to do it in the long term. I believe that the role of the African Nova Scotian School Board member in all of our boards will play a very key role in ensuring that that all of these issues are in fact addressed on a continuous basis, not just in a given budget year, but will continue to be part of the, if I could use the phrase, become part of the culture of the board in terms of how they operate.
Thank you for the answer, Minister. I'd like to recognize the member from Halifax Needham.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I also want to ask the Minister about funding for the Black Educators Association. The Black Educators Association has been around for a while. It provides services in various parts of the province. It does a lot of work tutoring young people and working with kids in various communities. I'm very lucky to have the Black educators situated in my own constituency, doing work in the vicinity of inner city schools and the junior high schools. And what I'd like to ask the Minister is, to what extent has the funding for the Black Educators Association changed in the last 10 years? To what extent has there been incremental increases in the Black educators' budget over a 10-year period?
Thank you for the question. Direct that to the Minister of Education.
Thank the honourable member for the question, and perhaps for the benefit of the committee, I could just provide a brief description of the association and something of the funding arrangement as I understand it, and I would need to provide more detail in order to provide the 10-year history the honourable member seeks. But it's a provincial grant to assist with the salaries and operating costs of the regional educators program. And this grant is based on their program requirements and is administered by the Black Educators Association. And the BEA's focus is on education involving literacy programs, tutoring, education committees, anti-violence concerns, and equity. The Black Educators Association provide opportunities and programs for the Black community to get involved with educational successes. And the amount of funding for that is $657,000. That number, I understand, has been consistent for the last 2 years. As I indicated, with respect to the 10-year history the honourable member would like me to comment on, I would need to do some research before I could provide that commentary.
Thank you, Minister. Recognize the member from Halifax Needham.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would be very pleased to see what the trajectory has been for the Black Educators Association over a longer period of time. I think that I've been asking these questions now for 5 years, and I haven't seen an increase in the 5 years I've been here. So I'm just wondering if it may be a longer period than that. And I know that I know some of the folks who provide tutoring service and the outreach work and the literacy work, and they're extraordinarily dedicated group of people. And this is an organization that certainly young people and families in the community I represent look forward to establishing their programs at the beginning of the school year, and they sort of are sad to see them end when the school year comes to an end. I also want to ask the minister about whether or not there's been any evaluation done in his department vis-a-vis the Student Code of Conduct. There was I think with the former minister, there was a Student Code of Conduct introduced into the schools. There was an allocation of, I think, $100,000 to implement the Student Code of Conduct. And I know that quite recently the Halifax Regional School Board have been doing public meetings around the municipality talking about violence and bullying, specifically bullying in the schools. And I attended one of these meetings, and at this meeting there was some discussion about the usefulness of a student code of conduct. And it seems to me that this is an area, if government has introduced a code of conduct, we haven't seen the impact of that code of conduct. So I'd like to know what from the department's point of view, the impact has been of that code of conduct. Has there been an evaluation? Is there a plan to monitor? And what exactly is the department doing with respect to classroom violence?
Thank you for the question, and I'll direct that to the Minister of Education. The Minister of Education.
I want to thank the honourable member. My understanding there is an additional $50,000 in this year's budget for that program, and I can tell you that we've committed to develop the code of conduct for students and teachers that recognizes and supports a respectful and healthy atmosphere of learning. And that is something that we had some discussion about in the committee, I believe, on Thursday past. The code of conduct has been developed, and guidelines on the code, as well as a guide on teaching strategies to address behavioral issues, will be implemented by January of 2003. So that has been completed, and it will require extensive in-servicing to implement. And currently, 3 school boards are doing pilots in this area with $25,000 grants from the department, and no boards have consultant or coordinator positions / expertise in this area. And this will provide seed funding for 2 more pilot projects. That is the amount of $50,000 which we've brought forward now. And it is a matter which is of considerable importance to the department and to myself, because I really believe that a proper attitude of individuals within a school environment is essential for learning to take place, and for individuals to feel that their capacities will in fact be allowed to flourish within such an environment. And when there isn't the level of respect that's necessary for schools to function properly, then we're missing the boat. And it is a huge challenge. I believe that we're obviously in a much different situation today than we were prior to the Charter of Rights, and how we achieve our objectives now will require considerable emphasis on the part of everyone to come to an understanding of our responsibilities of one to another within a school environment.
Thank you, Minister. I recognize the member from Halifax, Needham.
Thank you, and I want to thank the minister. Yes, I think this is an area that that is of very big concern to many parents and certainly to teachers and administrators. I was in one of the schools in my constituency. I have 5 schools in my constituency, and 3 of the 5 schools are designated as inner city schools. And one of those schools, the day I was in to visit, the principal was telling me about an incident that had happened the prior Friday, where a grade 3 student had pulled a knife on a grade 1 student in the school. And you know, these things are shocking when they occur, but they're happening. And we really need to find the resources to deal with these kinds of situations. I want to ask the minister about the Department of Education requirement around transportation and busing. And I represent a constituency where not so long ago, a group of young people and their parents came to me to talk about how their kids are having a difficult time, especially in the winter, getting from where they live to the high school. These young people live just outside. In fact, they live right on the cusp, you would say, of the 3.6 kilometer limit for transportation provided by the board to the kids. And they have to buy bus passes if they want to use the transit buses. Bus passes are $51, $52 a month. And in families where you have 2 kids and you have incomes that are often $14,000, $15,000, $16,000 gross a year, this is just simply prohibitive. And one of the things we did was we staged a walk. I walked with the kids from their homes to the high school, and I was amazed at the number of phone calls I got afterwards, not only from the very local area in which I had walked from, but also all around the metro area. I got calls from families for whom the 3.6 kilometer distance is simply it's simply too far to walk, particularly in the harsh winter months that we've just had. And I'm wondering, how was that? I get asked this often and I can't answer it. How was it determined that 3.6 kilometers would be the distance from schools? So that's the first question. And the second question is, how exactly is it measured when the measurement is actually done? Because there is some question about the accuracy of the measurements that are going on as the boards establish who's going to be provided with transportation and who isn't.
Thank you for the question. Direct that to the Minister of Education.
The honourable member is seeking some explanation as to the origin of the number, and I'm told that the origin goes so far back that it is a conversion of the English system of a distance of 1.5 miles. So that perhaps can put us in the time frame in terms of when the distance might have been determined. At least we know that it was determined prior to a date when the metric system was implemented within this country. So I provide that with just to give you some sense of how far back it goes, and that is a maximum figure. Boards are free to set their own policy within that framework, and indeed some boards use 2 kilometers as a distance. Others use different figures, and I appreciate the concern that the honourable member has expressed with respect to this issue, but that is my understanding of the history. I can only put it in a time frame. I can't be precise, but we do know something about how old it is, and we do also know that boards have the latitude to set their own distances within that framework.
Thank you, Minister. Recognize the member from Halifax Needham with 25 minutes left.
Thank you very much. I have then one other question for the minister, and it's about the underfunding of the Halifax Regional School Board. The Halifax Regional School Board, certainly as I was attempting to advocate for some flexibility around the transportation policy, consistently provided me with information that would indicate that they are underfunded on a per capita basis in comparison to other school boards around the province. And certainly this is increasingly becoming a sore point within the area. People in my constituency ask me, why is it that this province and this government underfund this particular board? To the extent that that supplementary funding from the regional government, the municipal government, has become a way to provide services to the regional school board. And this, every year, we see the same dance being played out here in the Halifax Regional School Board, where the music program and some of those other programs that are so needed and so valued in our board, like the 4+ programs, like the designation of the intercity schools in smaller class sizes. These things are all jeopardized when the board goes to the regional municipality to ask for supplementary funding, and they present their information, which includes the inequity in funding for the Halifax Regional Board. And I think that that sooner or later, this little dance that goes on is going to end, and the people who will be hurt by this, I fear, are the children in our education system. So I want to ask the minister if he could provide any kind of rational explanation for why the Halifax Regional School Board is underfunded.
Thank you for the question, and I'll direct that to the Minister of Education.
I want to thank the honourable member for the question. First of all, I want to point out that the supplementary funding that is received by the Halifax School Board is to provide funding for programs that are not part of the core program funded by the province of Nova Scotia. And so the programs that are funded by that are programs that are not available to other students in the province, at least not available through the core program as it exists. Now, with respect to the funding of school boards in the province, and the Halifax board in particular, 90% of the board funding is on a per student basis, as is the case for all boards. And the remainder is allocated to the boards on the basis of cost pressure. But even if we take the figure of the per student allotment for school boards, then there are fundamental differences as you move from one part of the province to another. The transportation system that needs to be in place to deliver students to schools in the area referenced by the honourable member for Richmond, the Strait District School Board, that transportation system on a per student basis is far more expensive than the transportation system that is required to deliver students to schools in other boards, or in particular in the Halifax Regional School Board. So there are differences in the cost pressures there. The honourable member for Richmond earlier made reference to the fact that we have schools with declining populations, but those schools need to be heated. Those schools have an administration. Those schools need to be maintained. There needs to be all of the services provided to those buildings that are provided to buildings that are full of students in, we'll say, in the Halifax board. So the amount of money that is available for a board such as the Strait Board, or a board such as Cape Breton, or areas that have vast distances to transport students, is quite a different problem than exists in other areas. Now, that is not to say that that there aren't unique problems to the Halifax District School Board as well, but the per capita funding that is allocated in many respects can go considerably farther in some boards than it can in others. And if you have a population that is much greater and more concentrated than you have in other parts of the province, then the efficiencies that you can achieve with the expenditure of those dollars is quite different than it is in areas of the province where enrollments are considerably less, and where students or in areas where students have to be transported considerable distances. If you, for instance, the Halifax Regional School Board transports a third of its students. Other boards have to transport virtually all of their students. So the cost factor is quite different on a per student basis. I hear the honourable member making reference to Antigonish. Unfortunately, the new schools they built in Antigonish were built in such a location that now all of the students virtually are bused to that location. Where if I indicated earlier, had they been put in another location, more of the students might have been able to be walk to that particular location. But nevertheless, no, those schools were built came on stream much later than that, and came on stream while the honourable member who was interjecting was in fact a member of cabinet, and the locations were picked in that time frame.
Thank you, Minister. I'd like to recognize the member from Cole Harbour Eastern Passage, and the time will be 7:24.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank the Minister, thank my colleague from Halifax Needham for giving me an opportunity to take the next 18 minutes to talk about a few education issues related to my particular constituency and generally. I want to talk about the proposal made by the former minister, and now this minister is still in the same Department of Education, with regard to the promise to reduce class sizes to 25 or less children starting in grade primary of this year. It's a personal interest to me, obviously, because I have a son starting grade primary in the fall. But one of the things that was interesting was when we registered him in January or February, what we were told, we registered him for French immersion. And what we were told was that if he did not, if, for example, there were 52 children who registered, that would mean there'd be 2 classes of 25 and 2 kids would have to be bused somewhere else, in which case it could be for living in Eastern Passage, could be, you know, a matter of an hour bus ride for a 5-year-old child. And I guess I'm just trying to get a sense, and I assume this is happening all over the province. Has your department taken into consideration some of these side effects of a policy of 25 or fewer children in a class, and some of the problems that might be created, particularly in the case of French immersion? And what is your understanding of what will be happening and what funding will be provided to address them?
Thank you for the question. I'll direct that to the Minister of Education. The Minister of Education.
I want to thank the honourable member for the question. The member does raise a question that's worthy of consideration. And we are prepared to be flexible in terms of accommodating the students and the needs of the students in consultation with parents and school officials. Very often the initial numbers of enrollment may drop or be adjusted, and we would not want to make final decisions until such time as those numbers become firm and are clear in everyone's mind. There are situations where combined classes would be considered in order to meet that particular commitment, and so it is something that we are prepared to be flexible around in consultation with parents and with school officials, and it is something that we're very confident that we can meet our objective with respect to this commitment, but there may be some unique circumstances that would have to be addressed uniquely, but with that objective being clearly in mind.
The member from Cole Harbour, Eastern Passage.
So is the minister trying to say that no matter whether it's French immersion or English language primary, that the Department of Education is going to go on a case-by-case basis for each school? Is he saying they don't have a policy in place as to what to do if these, quite frankly, if I'm aware of it, I suspect many other parents are being told the same thing, these circumstances may arise. Is there not a policy in place as to how that will be implemented? Or are you saying it's going to be done on a case-by-case basis?
Thank you for the question. Direct that to the Minister of Education.
There are expectations that are out there that are understood by the boards, but we've been quite clear from the outset that, for instance, the class of 26 is not going to become 213s. That will not happen, and we have had good discussions with school board officials, and they understand what our expectations are, and we don't anticipate making decisions on every single issue that might come forward. The guidelines are out there. It is our expectations that the boards will work to achieve those guidelines, and there will be certain circumstances that perhaps would have to be considered.
Thank you, Minister. The member from Cole Harbour, Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Will the minister at least agree with me that the primary means by which this policy will be implemented is if there are slightly more children than 25 for a class, that the other children will have to, in the case of this coming year primary, will have to go into a grade 1 class. It will be split classes. Will he admit or acknowledge today that that is the main means by which you're going to deal with any overflows of more than 25 children in a primary class?
The Minister of Education.
Mr. Chairman, we have in fact put in place funding that would allow for the hiring of 75 teachers in order to achieve this particular program, and it is our expectation that the research that was done on that number is good research, and we believe that it can be accomplished. Will there be situations where there will be mixed classes? The answer is yes, there will be. But will that be the solution in all instances? No, it won't be. There will be enough teachers and should be enough teachers in order to meet the objectives of the program.
The member for Cole Harbour, Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to talk, and maybe you've answered these questions from other members, and I apologize if I'm going over ground that you've covered with other members in estimates, but I want to talk a minute about school construction over the next couple of years. I recall last year a letter being sent from your, maybe it wasn't your predecessor, it might have been the deputy minister, it might have been Mr. Clattenburg from your department, but a letter sent to the school board in Halifax specifically outlining 4 schools that were the tentative list of schools for construction. That was in January of 2002. That was a replacement for QEH St. Pat's. It was a new high school for Middle Musquodoboit. It was I believe, a mixed junior high elementary school in Jador area, and there was an elementary school in Waverly. That was the original list back in January 2002. You then took that list and sent it to the school board and asked for them to confirm whether that's what they wanted or whether they wanted to adjust that list. And I believe the school board wrote you back another list with 3 of those schools confirmed, and I think including the 4th was Hammonds Plains. I guess I'm just trying to verify, did your department what did the Halifax Regional School Board finally settle on as the 4 schools that it wanted constructed based on the list that you submitted to them?
The Minister of Education.
Previously, I undertook to table the list of schools that the boards have put forward, and we will table that particular list. I would want to point out to the honourable member that the School Capital Construction Committee, when it went back to the boards, was asking the boards for confirmation that this is their list. It is not our list that went back.
Thank you. The member from Cole Harbour, Eastern Passage.
So I take it the minister, maybe he can just acknowledge with a head nod or shake. I take it the minister hasn't tabled those documents yet. No, I'm sure it will come shortly after we finish estimates. So I guess my question, though, is that there were 4 schools identified. Presumably your government has identified 4 schools in the Halifax Regional Municipality to be built. Is it your over what time frame is that, though? Is that for 2003, 2004, or is that for the next 3 fiscal years? Over what time frame are we suggesting 4 schools will be built in the HRM?
The Minister of Education.
The schools in question, Mr. Chairman, are schools that would be under construction in the period from 05 onward. We're currently concluding the current round, if you like, of buildings and alterations and renovations. So the next step would basically be from 05 onward.
The member from Cole Harbour, Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Chair. So you say 05 onward. So, for example, I think your government's already announced the construction of a new school in Hammonds Plains. Can you tell me what year that is scheduled to be completed?
The Minister of Education.
It's September of 05.
The member from Cole Harbour, Eastern Passage.
And when you say 05 onward, are we saying that, I mean, this is all presuming what happens after the next election, which I wouldn't want to presume, but if your government right now is projecting, and your department is projecting that these 4 schools in HRM will be built from 05 onward, what do we mean, 08, 09, 015, or 2015? What exactly are we talking about as some timeline on the other end, or is it an infinite number?
The Minister of Education.
Most of them we would anticipate being in the 06, 07, 08 time frame. Okay.
The member from Cole Harbour, Eastern Passage.
So then would the minister say that if a school wasn't submitted on the list from the Halifax Regional School Board last year when you requested confirmation, that we're talking 07 before there'll be any new construction beyond those 4 schools on that list? Is that correct?
The Minister of Education.
I thank the honourable member for the question, and I want to make it clear that the list, if I can use that term, is not a permanent list in the sense that if school boards come forward and for good and valid reason they say we need to change this priority, then of course the Capital Construction Committee would have to do an evaluation of that request, and that evaluation would come forward for consideration. However, the list is at this juncture, and the list when it is presented will be a fairly clear guide of where we're going with respect to the future, but whether or not it is something that's written in stone forever would preclude the capacity to be able to respond to changing circumstances.
The member from Cole Harbour, Eastern Passage.
I think I have just over, I guess I got 5 minutes. 5 minutes with. Okay, Mr. Chair, my question then is this. I understand what the minister is saying. That being the case, is the minister saying that if the list was submitted with 4 schools, the school boards come forward with a valid reason to alter that list? 4 is the final number that will be built in Halifax Regional Municipality between now and 07, but which of those 4 schools it is depends on any priorities the school board sets. Or is the minister saying it can go beyond those 4 schools if the school board comes forward with new schools that are a priority that need to be dealt with as well as those 4?
The Minister of Education.
Let me say to the honourable member that the number of schools that can be considered must be considered within the context of available funding. And so if for some good and valid reason a school board comes forward with a change that needs to be supported, and that change requires the expenditure of considerably more money than was anticipated for some other project, then we obviously need to rework everything that's before us relative to that particular board. And we need to fit those requirements within the total the total program of the province, which is where the School Capital Construction Committee's work comes in, which is to prioritize the entire province. So it does very much depend upon changing circumstances. And
The member from Cole Harbour, Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, that doesn't answer my question. I understand what the minister is saying, but you keep using the word change, which I interpret to mean that if the Halifax Regional School Board has submitted 4 schools in 2002 as what they want constructed between now and 2007, that the purse of money may result if, let's say, they want 4 high schools. That might mean more money has to be spent. But my question is the minister saying that it will only be 4 schools under his government's agenda, 4 schools built in HRM between now and 2007, and that if the school board wants to, as he uses the word, change that, one of those schools falls off the list, another one is added? Or is it a matter if the school board wants to add to that list beyond those 4, they have the right to do that, assuming the money is available?
The Minister of Education.
the board always has the right to submit to the School Capital Construction Committee, any changes that they wish, and they would be, well, additions, deletions, however you want to characterize it. Then they obviously have the capacity to be able to do that. The School Capital Construction Committee would analyze the request, and based on that analysis, recommendations would be forthcoming. And the analysis, of course, would include extensive consultations with the board.
The member from Cole Harbour, Eastern Passage.
Okay, but Mr. Chair, is the minister saying, though, assuming that there are no further requests from the HRSB, that it's his government's intention to build 4 schools in HRM between now and 2007?
The Minister of Education. The Minister of Education, with 1 minute left in term for the NDP caucus.
thank the honourable member. The numbers, more precise numbers, will be forthcoming once once Cabinet has completed its analysis and discussion of the matter, and at that time it will become clear. Okay, become clearer.
20 seconds, a member from Cole Harbour, Eastern Passage, for closing comment.
Thank you. Well, I will say that we'll have another hour to keep asking these questions at another point later on. So I look forward to talking to the minister again and continuing this conversation so we can try and nail down exactly how many schools HRM will be getting in the next 5 years.
Thank you for your question, member. And now I'd like to recognize, is it the member from Cape Breton Nova, the Liberal Caucus? 7:24. You have 1 hour in turn. Time for tonight's estimates will be 9:05.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'm not proposing to speak for an hour. I know the NDP will be very unhappy to hear that, but nonetheless, I propose that the honourable member for Cape Breton West, who's now busily completing some research of the public accounts and various other documents, will be in fine form in about 10 minutes when he gives me the signal that he's found the figures he needs to embarrass the government. Now, in the meantime, I shall kill time with some reasoned remarks, I hope. Now, let me say that one of the great accomplishments of the Liberal government of Premier John Savage and Russell McClellan was in the field of education, and specifically in the field of school construction. The school construction program that Savage and McClellan had underway was the greatest school construction program in the history of Nova Scotia. Let that be said first. For the record. Now, it was called P3, and I don't know where that acronym came from. It wasn't like 30, 60, 90 or some of them that I know where they came from. This one just happened to come down from the sky. Public-private partnership. Ah, someone over there has discovered what that stood for. And it did have a meaning. It wasn't just like NDP that means nothing. It was a formula. A formula. And it stood, yes, for public-private partnership. Now, what was so terribly wrong about that? I know that the NDP had nightmares about P3, and they thought it was absolutely terrible. Terrible. And you know, they issued press releases and manifestos and proclamations ad nauseum about how terrible this P3 was. And people came to me saying, what's this P3? Is that a new chemical that's been discovered? You know, because they didn't know what it was. And I said, well, do you see that new school down the street that's going up? And they said, oh, yes, that's the biggest school construction program we've ever had in the history of our community. I said, well, that's P3. That's what it is. That it builds schools. Are you against schools? Oh, no, they said, we're not against schools at all. Well, then I would pull out the latest press release that I had from the Honourable Robert Chisholm, who was then leader of the NDP, saying, and if our party gets in, we will abolish P3 immediately. Well, I said, now see what Robert Chisholm has said in this press release? That means that if he gets into office, he's going to tear down that new school that's under construction down the street. Oh, yes, because he said he would abolish P3 immediately. And what does abolish mean? Well, it means to cancel, to end, to annul. So I had visions, if the NDP got in, that the new school would come crashing down. And when I heard that, I did not want the NDP to get in, Mr. Chairman. I didn't. And so I spread the good word to my constituents that the NDP says that if they get in, the new school that's now under construction will come crashing down because it will be immediately abolished. Immediately abolished. So says Robert Chisholm. Oh, and to prove the point, I took quotes from Mr. Chisholm, not from his press release, but from the Daily News and from the Chronicle Herald, and said, the Chronicle Herald on such and such a date says, quote, we will abolish P3 immediately if we get in, unquote. Robert Chisholm, leader, New Democratic Party of Nova Scotia. Now take it for what the man says, I told him. This election coming up is like a referendum. It's like a referendum, a plebiscite on the question, do we want the new school or don't we? Vote yes if you want the new school, vote Liberal. Vote no if you don't want the new school, vote NDP. And if you're wondering about the PCs, they got 2% of the vote, so that's why I don't talk about them. Yeah. When the people had the question put to them, they overwhelmingly endorsed the new school. So the people said that P3 was good. The people said it was good. And that's why I stand here defending a school construction program that met public needs. What was wrong with it? Now, the NDP say what was wrong with it was incorrectly financed. It wasn't financed according to the A plus B theorem, or whatever it is that they believe in down that way. It wasn't. Well, the people put me back in when I put these questions to them. That's where you guys can't get over the facts. Yeah. Now, in Whitney Pier, we had the new elementary school that goes from grade primary to grade 6, known as Harborview. Harborview was a $12 million construction project. Beautiful school, they say. Even the NDP admit it. Beautiful school. It's the financing, they say, because it didn't adhere to the A plus B theorem, or whatever their financial doctrine this week happens to be. You know, they're a party that my friend from the honourable member from Cape Breton South used to say had a new flavor every day. Yeah. So we don't know what they advocate. They just say they are against P3 and all that it stands for. Meaning, as I've said, that they were against these new schools. Well, the new schools came anyway, notwithstanding the NDP. And let me tell you a little story, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, because it wasn't just Harborview School that was built in Whitney Pier. There was also the Greenfield School. It was built in the riding of Cape Breton Centre to service young people from that riding and from my riding because they live in adjoining communities. Yeah. And I never once heard that the NDP said that they didn't want that new school built there. Not once. But they were against P3. Who cares about how it's financed as long as it's built? As long as it's built. But if you want to learn about why it was financed that way, the answer was because the Liberals believe in not increasing the public debt. That's why it was financed that way. Unlike the Conservatives, Mr. Chairman, who balanced the budget by going $50 million deeper into the hole. Unlike the NDP, which in Ontario under Premier Bob Rae got the deficit, the debt there down to, whichever way, $13 billion. $13 billion they put the province of Ontario into. That crowd of save the money over there.
They won't be back.
Now, what did our school construction program do? It transferred the burden of financing the construction from the public sector to the private sector. That's what it did. Now, what's so wrong with that? Well, Mr. Chairman, if you're a dogmatic socialist, you don't believe in the private sector. You think that everything should be under public ownership, that there should be the full nationalization of all the means of production, distribution, and exchange. That is the classical formula of socialism. They want the government to own everything, no private sector whatsoever. And if you adhere to that point of view, then no wonder they would be against private sector construction, private sector exchange, or private sector distribution. Hey? But you know, Mr. Chair, they tried that in certain other countries and it didn't seem to work too well. Didn't seem to work too well, you know. I remember, I won't go back as far as Joseph Vissarionovich Djugashvili, better known as Stalin. I won't go that far back. I'll go to perhaps the days of Konstantin Chernenko. Konstantin Chernenko, in his days, it was all right for collective farmers to have a 1 acre plot, but not bigger, where they could raise their own vegetables and take them down to the market and sell them. So to that extent, private enterprise was allowed in the Soviet Union. But you know, what happened there was that they found that these little 1 acre farms could produce more and better vegetables than the vast acreage of the collective farms. And in the long haul, the collective farms were replaced by the kind of agriculture we have here in Canada with private farms, because it was more efficient, it worked better, and produced better tasting vegetables, I'm told, doctor, if I'm not wrong. The doctor says I'm right. So I must be right. Now, we got back to education, but what I was just saying, Mr. Chairman, was about education, because it's the absence of education that holds the NDP back. They still think that everything should be under public ownership. They still believe in nationalization. Oh yes, everything, everything. Even if they had their way, they would nationalize education, quite obviously. They want all school construction to be not only done by contractors, I guess they're private sectors, they want a state-run construction company to build the schools. That's their model. That's their ideal. Now, if we could set up the People's Construction Company under public auspices with all shares to be owned by the province of Nova Scotia, that, they say, would be better than what we have now with private contractors doing construction jobs. You have to, you have to get the vision to see the picture, Mr. Chairman. You have to. Now, I don't know. I don't know. But in any event, let me get back to the topic of education and away from the rabbit tracks. Let me say this, Mr. Chairman. Our record in education was good, because if you compare it by the yardstick of how many schools did we build as compared to how many schools did they build, you find they didn't build any. They didn't build any. And these people over here are moving forward at a very slow pace. You might say a snail's pace, as compared with the great liberal advance of new schools. Well, as Smallwood would say in Newfoundland, it was almost revolutionary. It was, yes. Now, brilliant, indeed. That's why they couldn't tolerate that government being in power and had to put that government in. That's the NDP answer. In any event, Mr. Speaker, we got new schools under the Liberals. We're not getting them under the Conservatives because they're following the advice of the NDP and financing everything through the ordinary, orthodox, doctrinaire socialist way. And because the public purse is bankrupt, in spite of their claim of having balanced the budget by going deeper into debt daily, there isn't the money there to build more schools. Now, we have some need for new schools. I see my good friend from Cape Breton Centre down there. I'm not going to try to invade his turf. He looks after it quite well, but he will tell you, I'm sure when he gets his turn, that they need a new high school at Dominion. And we have a member from Glace Bay over here. He's not, well, I'm not supposed to say he's not here right now, but anyway, we have a member from Glace Bay over here, and he'll tell you the same thing, Mr. Chairman. We do need a new high school in Dominion because they're tearing the high school there down right now. I just drove past it this past weekend, and their windows were all boarded up, and moving vans were there to take out whatever was movable inside, and I guess the bulldozer will be by next week or so. Or maybe the wrecking ball on the end of a crane, taking down the school in one day. Our government, Mr. Speaker, built schools. This government, Mr. Speaker, tears them down. Tears them down. Now, have I said enough to be educational on these matters? Does that mean a minute is left? You want to get into collective farming? Well, we'll have to do that under the Department of Agriculture. Yeah. I think the honourable member for Cape Breton West is well ready now to take up the challenges, and having said my piece, I rest my case. Thank you.
The honourable member for Cape Breton West. Does the Minister of Education wish to respond to the member for Cape Breton Nova's dissertation? The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I thoroughly enjoy the honourable member for Cape Breton Nova when he gets to his feet. as almost as much today as I did when I first heard him here, I believe 34 years ago. And it's interesting that on those occasions, Mr. Chairman, when he would get to his feet, that he in fact sounded very much like a dogmatic socialist to me. And I can say, Mr. Chairman, as I listen to him today, what a difference 34 years makes. Because I don't know if honourable members on this corner of the House were to remain here for another 34 years, whether they'd undergo such a transformation or not. But it's certainly been enlightening to listen to the honourable member and hear him expound upon the values of liberalism, and it's interesting. But I can say that I would always defend anyone's right, Mr. Chairman, to change their mind. And with that in mind, I would point out to the honourable member that indeed we are building schools in this province, and we are spending and spent $7 million on the construction of the Shipyard Elementary. That's the St. Anthony Daniel. There's another $26 million from the Halifax West, and I was quite pleased to have been able to attend the opening of that particular facility, along with the Premier and the honourable member for Halifax Bedford Basin, and that was it's a wonderful facility, and tremendous progress was made in the building of that facility with respect to the needs that have to be attended to relative to the building of schools, and in the environmental advancements that were made in the design of that school, the safety advancements that were made in the design of that school were very significant, and a great deal of progress was made in that particular facility. The school at Windsor, the Avon View High School, that is the project involving $18 million to serve the needs of 950 students, and that school is underway, and it will be open at the end of September in 2003. And they were okay. And there is also the Rankin School, an amount of $6.2 million. It will be open in September of 2005. And South Colchester High School, $20 million. That's going to be open in September of 2003 for 810 students. The East Pictou High School, an amount of $21 million. That will be open in September of 2003. The West Pictou High School will be open in September 2003, an amount of $22.5 million, Mr. Chairman. And the Truro Junior High School is ready to go to tender, and that is a project to serve the needs of 525 students. The Amherst Elementary School is scheduled to open in September of 2004, serving the needs of 450 students, a budgeted amount of $8.1 million. The Cumberland Elementary School, serving the needs of 350 students. And that, I'm sorry, the Amherst Elementary is 05 that it will be open, and similarly with the Cumberland Elementary, open in 05. And the Shelburne High School, Mr. Chairman, serving the needs of 570 students, will be open in September of 2004. Mr. Chairman, we are building schools, and we will be coming forward with an additional building program in the very near future, which will take us well into the well into the latter years of this decade with respect to school construction as well as alterations. The honourable member spent a great deal of time on the virtues of P3. I can tell you with my limited experience with those facilities, there were a number of shortcomings. One, of course, was related to the amount of land that was provided for recreation facilities for the students of those schools, found to be severely lacking. The access to the schools is an issue. We have recent evidence of that and the costs associated with that with respect to the contracts that were signed, which left a great deal to be desired. We have issues with respect to location of the schools. One of the schools that in my riding, we had to find an additional $800,000 in order to ensure that there was sufficient access for that school so that the students would not be denied safety in the event that there was an emergency of some sort, and to accommodate the flow of traffic in and out of that school. So I can say to the honourable member that there were a lot of shortcomings in that particular program. We will be building schools. We will be funding them adequately. And Mr. Chairman, I can say that those schools will belong to the people of this province and available to the people of this province for their use. Thank you.
The member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 47 of the supplement to the public accounts, there's an item there, Holiday Inn Harbourview, $91,934.27. Would the minister please apprise members of the committee what that's for?
The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The Holiday Inn Harbourview expenditure of $91,000 was composed of the following. There was a math, English, chemistry workshops, that's plural, and involving teachers from all across the province who came for those workshops. That was an amount of $84,760, and I would point out that that's workshops plural paid to that facility for those workshops. Active Young Readers P to 3 focus group meetings, that was an amount of $4,442.85. The Nova Scotia Teachers Union bargaining negotiations, there was an expenditure there of $1,386.25. There were accommodations for meetings, 2 items, $684 for one, $275 for another. Meeting expenses, $195.89, and Scotia Learning negotiations, $186.23. And the total of all of those items, Mr. Chairman, is $91,934.27.
The Cape Breton West member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank the minister for that information. It strikes me a little ironic because last year, when his predecessor was doing her budgets, the total hotel bill for the Department of Education was somewhere in the vicinity of $185,000. And at that time, she went to great pains to try and defend the $185,000, but also gave an undertaking to members of the committee at that time that she would make an effort to reduce those costs. Now, if we were to take that $91,934,000 and add it on to all the other hotel bills across the province that were incurred by the department, which, by the way, add up to $251,563. Add that on to the $91,934, Mr. Chairman, and we have the Department of Education spending $343,497 on hotel bills. Now that's almost double what the Minister of Education indicated in the committee last year would not grow, but rather would be reduced. Now, Mr. Chairman, just so the Minister will be aware, you go through each individual line items. We have ones like Citadel Halifax Hotel, $35,525.85. We have the Delta Halifax, $12,463.55. We have Holiday Inn Select, $7,570.44. We have the Lord Nelson Hotel, $23,328.26. We have the Old Orchard Inn, $31,178.89. We have the Park Place Ramada Plaza Hotel, $28,344.37. We have the Prince George Hotel, $32,388.61. We have the Westin Nova Scotian, $11,961.44. We have the White Point Beach Lodge Limited, $21,807.30. Mr. Speaker, that is a lot of money on hotel bills for a department that's looking for ways to save money, despite the fact that his predecessor indicated that the $185,000, quote, seemed a little excessive, but she would do everything in her power to reduce that cost. Why is it that the total hotel bill for the Department of Education has effectively doubled in 1 year?
The Education Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to point out to members of the committee that the figures to which the honourable member is referring are for the fiscal year which ended March 31st, 2002, and that is clearly it's an entire year ago relative to that. But the honourable member should understand, and I'm sure he does, Mr. Chairman. He simply can't resist the lure of the numbers. But he should understand that in order for us to consult with our teachers, it is necessary for us to bring those teachers together. And to bring them together, it is necessary to pay their expenses when they're here visiting in the city. And that, we believe, is worth the price of that consultation, because they are the people who need to implement all of the programs which we put forward in our public schools. And without that consultation, the level of involvement of our teachers in this province would not be what it should be in order to have an effective implementation. So that indeed we do bring the teachers from across the province, and we will continue to bring teachers in from across the province for consultation, especially with the new initiatives which we have brought forward as a government. And I make no apologies to anybody for being heavily involved in consulting with our teachers. We will continue to involve them in the process of education, and that process requires to bring them in. Well, I hear the honourable member for Dartmouth talking over there. He perhaps doesn't fully appreciate what's involved in a teacher traveling from Yarmouth into Halifax for consultation, and the expenses that are involved in that, because he travels across the bridge in order, and those are the expenses that he has relative to it. The honourable members for Cape Breton certainly appreciate the expenses involved in traveling all of the way to Halifax for consultation, and we, as I indicated, will continue to provide that support to our teachers in order to ensure that they are very much a part of the consultations that are required for us to carry out our programs and to implement new programs.
The Honourable Cape Breton West member.
Well, Mr. Chairman, have you ever heard of such patronizing hogwash? That's exactly what we heard from the minister, saying that, oh, this is supplemental detail from the previous year. Well, the minister who defended the budget last year could say the same thing for the figures that she put on the table, the 185,000. The fact of the matter is, in a one-year period, under this watch, when they said that they were going to reduce the expenditures to hotels in this province, which, by the way, if the minister would check a little closely, he'll find that they're not all in Metro. They're around this province. They're across this province. The Old Orchard Inn is not in the capital city. The other hotel, Mr. Speaker, the White Point Beach Lodge, that doesn't sound like a facility here in Metro. And I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, if we went through other detail, we would find there are quite a few. Mr. Speaker, or Mr. Chairman, we have a lot of empty schools that the Department of Education could be using. We have a lot of office spaces by the various school boards in this province that could be used. We have a lot of facilities by Service Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations that could be used. Mr. Speaker, there's a lot of empty space that could be used, and for this minister to try and justify why we're now spending $344,000 on hotel bills while they're closing schools, while they're saying there's not enough money for books, while they're saying there's not enough money for teachers. My colleague from the Strait area asked about teaching cutbacks, and the minister chastised him for even trying to raise the issue, suggest that he was being a little bit politically mischievous. The fact of the matter is, Mr. Chairman, the government has its priorities mixed up. The Minister of Education indicated quite clearly that $185,000 was indeed a lot of money. And now this year, even though it's supplemental detail, he can blame it on his predecessor if he wishes, but he's still a member of that cabinet. He's still a member of that government who was, it's their watch that they more than almost doubled the amount of money that was spent on hotel bills. And for the life of me, Mr. Chairman, whether it's a P3 school, a conventionally built school, or whatever, with all the facilities that the Department of Education has across this province, for the minister to suggest that, well, this is what we had to pay to accommodate the teachers. Blame it on the teachers. It's always somebody else's fault that the department had to spend the money on this particular line item. Well, Mr. Chairman, I don't think that's acceptable. I don't think it's fair. I do agree with the minister. There are instances where if there are contractual negotiations going on back and forth and they need a facility, that type of exclusion and protective insulation from the media and from certain individuals or elements that would perhaps compromise the negotiations. You need that type of isolation. But surely to heavens, I hope the minister is not suggesting that the school board offices of this province are bugged. I hope he's not suggesting that there aren't enough facilities that are owned by the Department of Education or Department of Transportation and Public Works that could not be utilized. $344,000 is a lot of money, and I think that is absolutely excessive. And I would ask if the minister could give us some clarity, perhaps through his deputy minister, because his deputy minister is the same deputy minister that was here before budgets last year when the Minister of Education defended the $185,000 plus. Now we're up to $344,000. Now, if he's receiving that same type of professional advice, he could enlighten us, give us some clarity as to why the bill is going up when they gave us assurance with the same deputy minister the bill was going to go down.
The Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. A couple of things to point out to the members of the committee. When my predecessor made a commitment with respect to the expenditure of funds, at the time that she would have made that commitment, those funds for the year in question had already been expended. And so the honourable member knows that, and so for him to bring forward the numbers within this context, I think he owes the committee an explanation as well. And I'm glad to see him acknowledging that that in fact was the case. Now, the honourable member, I referenced bringing into Halifax, but indeed teachers go to various parts of the province, but it doesn't matter. Once they leave their own home, then they require accommodation wherever it is that they go. And I'm sure that the honourable member is not suggesting that we issue pup tents or that we travel around with Winnebagos and pick them up. The fact of the matter is that wherever it is that they go, they must be accommodated, and that requires that they have a room that is the standard, that is acceptable, that there is a room for them. I don't believe the honourable member suggesting that we put 3 or 4 teachers to a room. The teachers do need to take on nourishment while they're here, or while they're in the valley, or while they're at whatever location in the province that it is. And there are occasions, Mr. Chairman, when we negotiate the accommodations that are made available to teachers that are brought in for consultation, that part of the negotiation would include the hotel providing meeting rooms that are made available to us. And the honourable member references all of the facilities that